So, we're going to start chapter 177, and we're talking about two dimensions of Torah. One, Torah l'shma, or let's start the other way. Avid inish adaita the nafshe Avid. So adaita nafshe, what Torah does for us, and there's what Torah does, what we do for Torah, basically, for the sake of Torah, not for the sake of you, and for the sake of Torah. Ubira chapter 177, the top of 361. The explanation of this is the Inyan Iskashrus. Now we're going back to Iskashrus. Remember, chapter 176 was an explanation of chapter 175, where it began with Iskashrus, the three bonds that the Zohar talks about. And what he says, Iskashrus, when he's binding things, is ostensibly two separate things that get connected. So now he's going back. And the explanation of this is that the two dimensions in Torah we just learned, learning Torah. Because now, in this inyan, this idea, concept of binding, of connection, even though, as we discussed, it's something that is separate on its own. You're saying you're binding two things. You don't say binding, for example, on light and it's an luminary. You don't bind them. They are forever bound. There's a source of light, so it gives off light. Here you're binding something. So even though you are binding something that is separate, nevertheless, nevertheless, through the binding, there's an advantage from the unity that precedes it. We'll soon see. I don't know. I'm not sure. It sounds to me, before we learned, if you remember, in chapter 175, he said, his kasha is two separate things, and he brought from Biyurei Azayar that Mitzad Mamayla Lamato, there's actually a quality in his kasha because it's Pnimi Yeser, Nafshik Shuri B'Nafshi. But Mamata Lamayla, Dveikus is higher because Dveikus shows there's no separate things. So I'm not sure what he means that it's the same thing. He's talking about referring to that type of the quality of connecting something that's separate. He probably will explain it. But interesting, he's saying, in other words, there is a Hisardus. Regardless, you have to say that he's saying that whatever was before, when you bind two separate things, there's something deeper. I know what he's saying. The neshama, before it comes down below, is united with God. When it comes down below, and it's separate, so to speak, ostensibly, and you bind it, it achieves something greater than the unity that it had before it came down. That's Pasha is what he's saying. So let me just bypass the question. That's it.
The purpose of the Uredas is
right, but he's going to explain it. The Yuvan Zebiskash, and this is both Torah and Neshamas. Remember, we said Neshamas, as they come down into earth, they bind themselves, they connected and contained and manifest in the body and the animal soul. Torah, as it comes down to Chochmah, is Chochmah. So both of them are Iskashrus, he said, because they both have become somewhat separate from the source itself. Except very differently, because Torah retains its spiritual nature, its godly nature. But still, it's Chochmah, not Ratzon, as he put it. So he's saying now, when you bind it back, you bind it, as you bind it when it's in a lower level, it has a deeper connection than how it was before. Something is achieved through it. Yeah. Remember, he spoke about the lever. What's achieved from below is that we refine existence. But it looks like there's something achieved in the neshama itself. The Yuvan Zeh B'iskasha Shanasham Belakus Ubeteira. And we'll understand this in the binding and connection of the soul into godliness and in Teira. Through his descent in Bri Yetzira Asiya, meaning through the descent of the soul. Shenasis Kedover B'fnei Atzmei, where it becomes like a separate thing. And what's the proof? Look at our souls. Again, this doesn't mean the soul loses its divine properties, but now it is so-called severed from in a revealed way. We forget. The soul is now in a body, and it's now being controlled, and can live a life separate from God. God forbid. Al Kaponim, even if it's not separate from God, it's independent. There's an independence that a soul has down below. Through its binding through God and to Torah, it acquires an additional advantage and quality. But Inyan, who now he's going to explain what is added when the neshama comes down below and it connects. The Inyan in this is the Niksiv Shchira Nivanova B'nei Yerushalayim. I am dark. Vanova means and beautiful, the daughters of Israel.
Yerushalayim.
I'm sorry, daughters of Yerushalayim. So who's Ani? The Pashtus, the Taichis, he's talking to the daughters of Jerusalem and saying, I am dark and beautiful, hear ye daughters of Israel, right? The Pashtus, I think that's the
Pashtus, Yerushalayim are saying it.
The what? Bnei Yerushalayim are saying Shchir Ani?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it's the Pashtus that is being said to them. Okay.
It's plural. Ani is it's not plural.
That's the question that's asked.
It's talking about Bnei Yerushalayim, if you want to see that, but it's talking about them.
Okay.
Each one says
I don't remember the pshat, but let's say Pirush. She explains Bnei Yerushalayim koyal and neshama k'moshe b'shar shebatzilus. Daughters of Israel is referring to the souls the way they are in their root and atzilus. So commandment neshama shenasat to be tahiri. Like we say, the soul that you've given me is pure. This is referring back to the verses, the statements that were made earlier. Okay. The Tahira is explaining what is Tahira, which means pure. Is referring to the level of the containers of Atzilus. We're talking about the inner containers, the inner dimension, Kaned, as it's known. Yeah, this is explained. We learned this also earlier.
Why not oil?
Oh, what? Primis Hakelim. No, because it's already a level of Tahira. It's a state of being.
receives everything whole.
And what it's called the daughters of Israel, Zeu HaNeshamis Kameshem B'chinis Ibur B'Malchus D'Atzilus. So what does it mean B'neis? Why are they B'neis? Because they are the souls as they are in the pregnancy, B'chinis Ibur, like in a state of like a fetal state in Malchus of Atzilus. In other words, they haven't been born yet. That's why it's called B'neis, children like, daughters of. No, the Yerushalayim would be Malchus, and B'nai Yerushalayim would be the Neshamas within Malchus.
Why does it
What's
say
the
the nose
next
not
one?
finding?
Hmm?
Is there that I'm not getting? Why does it say the nose not finding? Why does it say daughters?
Malchus is Lashon Nekeva.
Neshama is Lashon Nekeva.
V'yesh Leimer, and we could say Mishum de Kashan Neshama hi b'chinis Malchus, oz b'chinis Mitzias Dovid the Shayer bo Inyan Hayira. He's explaining what does it have to do with Yerushalayim. It says because Neshama says they are in Malchus, they are now in a state of being. They're assuming some type of personality. So we call them Kalim, Primis HaKalim. The Shayer bo Inyan Hayira. Yerushalayim is Yira Shalom. So you can't say Yira on something that is completely connected. If the souls are completely one, that's more of a state of avo, or even beyond any type of emotion. Say that Shaykh Yira means a certain state of awe, means that you're something apart from. So they're connected but apart in a certain way. Like to explain elsewhere about Ava V'Yira, about love and awe above. How could you say love and awe in Atzilus? Seemingly not possible in the 10 spheres of Atzilus, because they are godliness mamish. So what's the love and awe? Who's loving and awe of whom? Nevertheless, the Malchus of Atzilus, which is already moving so-called out of Atzilus, Ksiv l'mayis amnecha kovid v'lo yodim. The Nehura Tata Kari Tadir. On Malchus it says L'mayim Zemnecha Kovid V'lo Yodum. Laman, in order to sing your praises, your glory, right? And not to be silent. So who's singing here? Why does it have to? Why do you need a calling out to and not be silent? Because it's referring to the lower waters. The expression Huda Tata. Once God separated the higher waters from the lower waters cry out, always call out. They want to reconnect. The Huda means oyer. No, you're right. The reason I said waters is because, the waters, it's connected. Sometimes it says boichen, ma'im tachtein and boichen. That's why. Similar expression. You're right. The lower light calls out constantly. So in other words, so even though it's still in Atzilus, but regarding it to the lower level, there's already a like the moon. The moon needs the light of the sun. So calling out, it wants to connect. That's love. Because Malchus is the revelation of Atzilus, but it's no longer, that's not the core of Atzilus. That's why the primary kelim are Malchus. That's why in Malchus, in the state of Malchus, is possible a yearning.
That's the lower part of Malchus, not the whole Malchus.
He's saying, yes, but Pashto is the lower part, but he's saying now Malchus in general. Then he's qualifying, and also the 10 spheres you could say, because this doesn't answer a different question. Chesed and Gvura of Atzilus are not Malchus, and there's also Avaviyida. So he's answering by that by saying, in general, that's the spheres also Avaviyida, Rotzi V'Shuv. But what's Rotzi? Even though it's all godliness, so he says Moti v'lei Moti. It's a more subtle form. It's not something that feels it's distant and it's yearning. Moti v'lei Moti means to extend and not to extend. It's a far more subtle type of inner movement. That even in the source, we talked about it before about Zman, time. That in the source, it's like a heartbeat type of thing. Mati, we said, Mati means to extend. Mati means Lagia, yeah. To reach, right. Lagia, to reach. But it's the root of Ratzi. It's not regular Ratzi Rishuv. Yeah, Ratzi Rishuv is an actual state where you're outside of the source and you're going back to the source. Mati v'lei Mati is much more in the source itself, a subtle movement, a subtle pulse. It's like And the same thing is with the souls, the way they are in Malchus. When they're in Malchus, because they're apart somewhat, and they're already not the core, they can have Yira, which that they should be called daughters of Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim comes from the word Yira, Yerushalayim, complete fear or awe. Gam Yishlemer, we could also say that Kavanahi al Nasham is the ban. Another explanation he's giving is that in truth is Malchus is really still is not yet Bnei Yerushalayim. But the souls are connected. But the souls of Ban, there's another level of souls that's called Neshamas of Ban. We learned this also before. There's Neshamas that are souls that primarily connected to the more matter, and souls that are connected more to spirit. So you can do it. Like it's known, she has Neshamas the Ma, and Neshamas the Ban. We learned about Iker. When we learn the primary work is Ikar Neshmasam Beguf or Ikar Neshmasam Beneshama. Like Moshe is an example of a Neshama of Ma. Eliyahu is an example of Neshama the Ban. That's why his body went up with him. Yeah, so we learned that the souls, their main primary thing is to transform the material, and their souls, their primary thing is to reveal light. That's the key difference. Moshe was here to reveal light. Eliyahu and some others were here to elevate Chanoich Eliyahu, to elevate material. Not really always referred to that way, not necessarily. It's sometimes called the souls that are called Bonim, sons, and the souls that are called Avodim, Eved. It's two different types of souls. He's just giving a different explanation now what means Bnei Yerushalayim. What? What?
Talks about it
in Tanya, yes, and also some Avov. Yeah. The Neshama Shem B'chinas Ma'ayin She'ikram Hu B'chinas Zod Atzilis. Souls from Ma, their primary thing is from Zav Atzilas V'em B'chinas Ayin Be'etzem, and they're fundamentally bittul. completely nullified. They have no personality. And as they descend below, they're not manifest, they're not contained in the material. They're those that serve God with their souls. Basically, expression of their soul. These are the souls that are called the sons of God. And then in this itself, there's higher levels, very high levels, that are called brothers and friends. He says in Likutei Torah in the explanation on Yonasi. These are the souls that are in Malchus, from level of Malchus, and their state of Yesha. Okay. They're in a state of Yesha, which means they relate to existence more. So they're souls that come to illuminate, they're souls that come to transform. In Tzaddikim itself. Two different types of neshamas. He's basically explaining Bnei Yerushalayim. What does it mean that they have Yira? So first explanation is because they're Malchus, so they're somewhat not the core of Atzilus. Now he's saying they're neshamas of Ban, where main neshamas that come from Zoh. There's neshamas that come from Malchus. It doesn't use those words. If that helps you, fine. And the way they are in pregnancy in Malchus, remember, Zoh is the masculine, Malchus is the feminine. So when they did a Yichud Zoh Malchus, Malchus is the one that gives birth to souls that will come into Biyah. So till now he was saying the Ibur of Malchus was what? Was Shamas Malchus.
He didn't say
Bnei Yerushalayim. Didn't say Banama. That was just Neshama as they are in Malchus. Now he's specifying that's Ban. So the way they are in Malchus, they're in a state of a Yesh.
So what is Ban? It's Lowell?
What?
What is Ban?
I just explained. Souls that their job is to illuminate is Ma. Souls that their job is to transform the Yesh is Ban.
That means they're going Lowell.
They're more manifest. They manifest. The Nitfas Begeshem. They get involved in the body more. There's a whole chapter we learned about this.
I remember.
It was a long time ago. I have to find it. A few places. Evdi Hashem ben Hashem. Huh? Do you remember? It's on the right side of the page. I'll tell you right away. What's it?
But the neshamas the ban are nitfas begeshem. They feel like more like in Geshem, or they still feel atzilus.
I'd have to interview them, but to find out. But
What an interview in the
Nitfas begeshem means that they are more.
they relate more to Gashmis. Exactly. Yeah, I'll make an interview with it. An interview with Ban and Ma. B'chlal Ma is Gematria Odom. Yud Kevovke is the nus Man is Yud Kevovke b'milui Alpha, and Ban is Gematria Behema b'milui Heyin. So just in general the picture between the difference between the two.
And Sag is related to Ma, right?
And Sag is related to Ban.
To Ban.
Yeah, but he's not talking about that now here. We talked about this before also. Okay, I have to find it before. It's in one of these. This is a new subject matter. I'm going to explain it. I'm just going to learn it inside, then I'll explain. Okay, here we go. Not bitl mitzias. And the way they descend below, their primary work is bitl chemer gufam. Is to the nullification, the sublimation of the coarseness of their bodies. Here, for Eliyahu shahaya beibur yud beis chedesh haya lamata bitl guf, and Eliyahu who was beibur 12 months. Moshe was the minimum amount, 7 months, because his main thing was oir. Smalabai is called eira. Eliyahu was a long pregnancy, 12 months, because he was much more involved in the body. His lamata, the bitl, his body was so sublimated to the extent that he went up beside Shemaima,
With his body.
With his body. Saira means with a storm, a in a divine storm. However, with Eliyahu it says his soul was level of ban of ma, just to complicate matters.
Yeah, it does.
In Samach Vav and Acheda, she talks about this at length, by the way. Talks about Moshe, Eliyahu, and Eliyahu is ban de ma. Yeah. There's ban de ban also. No, Moshe is ma, period. And these souls, they are manifest.
Which means
they're involved.
It was also ma. But it was ban, the ma.
Yeah.
Not ban.
And that's their primary work below in transforming and sublimating their bodies.
It's twice as demanding to be in the Shem of the Bond than to be in the Shem of the Ma.
It's harder. They both have a role. It's two different roles.
Yeah. Change it. So much longer. That's good.
Sometimes you say Moshe Shushbina de Matronisa, Shushbina de Malka, and Aaron Shushbina de Matronisa. It's a similar difference. Moshe, look, for example, in the Torah, very simple. Moshe was the lawgiver. He was the man of God, Yishalakim. So he spoke Mamay Lamata. He was Mam Shechair. Aaron was involved in Shalom Bayis and involved with people on the ground. And you need two Shushbinim. When you walk to the Chuppah, you need someone that represents God, and you need someone that represents the queen, the king and the queen. So Moshe in the Mamutz is very simple. Moshe is interface. Moshe represents the divine, like Shashim Lefanav we've been talking about. Aaron represents the queen, which is the neshamas below.
It's like Eliyahu, sort of.
In a certain way. Yeah. I'm just giving an example to understand. It's two different roles that they play. One involves himself more with the people, one is involved more in representing what God wants. Like here again, Moshe spoke what God wants. Aaron was the translator. That's why it didn't matter that Moshe couldn't speak because he was speaking God's words. Misam Pel Adam. But his brother was his so-called translator when necessary. Same idea. Moshe was, yeah. Now he goes back, and this is the meaning. This is that the daughters of Israel, they're the souls the way they're in Malchus. The Be'elah Neshama is shaykh lem achachabir doesn't beguf shcheiran even nova. Because in these souls, you can then say when it descends in the body, which soul? How can you say shcheirani? I am dark and beautiful. Dark refers to a concealment. You could say that only by the neshamas that are going through Yishalayim that are. There's a yira that cannot come rooted in Malchus, not in the shamas of, in this case, of Zah, or higher than Malchus, yeah, of the shamas of Ma. The shamas of Ma ain't shaykh in shcheirani. Souls of Ma, he says in the parentheses, it's not possible to say dark, I'm dark. Because even as they descend below, they remain in a state of utter nothingness. Only in the souls of Ban, who manifest and are connected to their bodies, there you can say Shcheira Vani, that I'm dark, beautiful.
Wow.
So Shcheira is a negative thing according to this.
No, the Shcheira is going to, when they come down where they're disconnected. And then he's going to say, Vanova, that it's deeper than the way they are above. That's what he's leading to. I'm sorry. Now that we've established that, this is all coming to explain that through that the souls, as it comes down below and connect through Torah and to God, have a depth that they don't have when they're above. So now he's going back. That's the bottom line you have to remember. Now these souls, the way they are above, they're ultimate bittul, they're ultimate subjugated. And ultimate unity with God, in godliness. And that's why they're called daughters of Israel. Pirush Yishlayim, Yira Shalom. Shalem is Yira. Yishlayim means Yira Shalom, complete Yira. That means they're completely absorbed into the divine. Yes, it's true that they're not the divine itself. They're not one as it is in Zah because they are Yira, as we said, but they're relatively one in that sense. In the creatures of Bri Yitzirasi, you cannot call them to have complete awe. Liyas behem abitl b'tachish shezeyin hayira. That they should have in them the ultimate subjugation, which is yira. The Gamba Malachim Sheyesh B'hem B'chinas Bittul Hari Ksiv. Even angels that have a bittul are a bittul, a subjugation to the divine. Ksiv Malachim Yosim Tehillah. Tahalla. Even by angels that have bittul Malachim Yosim Tahalla, which means what? Oh, of course, Matat.
He found some things that are not perfect.
Some flaws.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, by Malachim Yosim Tahalla, by Malachim we found some weaknesses, some what setback, some.
It's the flaws.
From the word Tahalla, what does Tahalla mean in Hebrew?
Negatives.
U'kamayim Razal afkuhu lematat. Like Razal say, afkuhu lematat. Afkuhu lematat means that they afkuhu is.
He said something. He did something.
So he was like punished. He was like
punished.
berated.
They gave him
Malchus.
Malchus.
Afkuhu lematat means that they lashed lematat. That means an angel can have some type of weakness. Yeah. But that's because the bittul in them is not complete. Like it says elsewhere. But Malchus, being that it's Mamash Alakus, even though, as he said, it's already a lower level in the sense in Revelation, that's called Yerushalayim. Because in the state of complete awe and subjugation and bittul and selflessness. The Ima Yesh, in parentheses, Yaz. The Ima Yesh HaMalchus is B'chinas Yesh. Even though Malchus is a state of Yesh, not like wisdom, Chachma, the first sphere, which is fundamentally, completely nothingness. And that's why David was a Bar Nafla, means he would have not been born, he would have been stillborn. David would have been, when he was born, he would not have any. Yeah, he would not live. Bar Nafla means a child that, unfortunately, like a miscarriage. Well, it's not about it's. Bar Nafla means the first 30 days. If a child, he would not have lived, except they gave him, as we know, that years were given to him by Adam and the others. So David was. Why was he Bar Nafla? Like we learned earlier, chapter 161, because David was from Chachma, and. Let me see a moment. Well, let me just see. Let me make sure. No, I remember this piece. 1 second. No, maybe Malchus.
Said Bittul and Yeshus. Some people didn't see it. Bittul and Yeshus.
Yeah. The whole Inyan HaMalchus b'chinas Isnasus v'Yeshus Zo David HaBanav leHava leChayin Kakel and so b'chinas Bittul v'Heder Mitzis Davka. Yeah. VeHaMalchus Lias b'chinas Yesh Ein Ze Klei Le'Ein Sof. Yeah. Correct. My mistake. So the explanation here is that David was Bar Nafla because he was Malchus. So since he was Malchus, and Malchus had a little element of Yesh in it, so cannot Malchus is Malchus. Ain't a keli in so Baruch Hu.
What does that mean?
It's not a keli. It doesn't have enough bittul. Makom mokim hari bittul betachlis dayin b'chinas bittul hayeshus legamri. So nevertheless, it's still an ultimate state of bittul. But bittul hayeshus legamri. Okay. So here's what we go. Here's what he's going to say here. We have to go back to some things we discussed a lot earlier. He's now saying, look, the whole point of this is to explain how when the souls come down below, they are in a state of concealment. There are souls that are not, like Hashem is the Ma. But Hashem is the Ban, they come down below, they're in a state of concealment. They're darkened. Why is that? Because in their root, they're souls that are meant to come down to that level. Now, if it was a soul coming from Zoh, in the Midas of Atzilus, Zoh is too intense for a soul like that. It's going to come down. It will not be subject to the concealments of existence because it's rooted in a very connected place. Malchus is still divine, but Malchus is already, like he said, not the core of Atzilus. It's already the outer reflection. That's why Malchus has an element of yearning, has an element of yira. So it's divine in one sense, but it already has an element of it that is going to leave room that when it comes down, it can be affected by existence. No, basically he's really explaining how different souls descend down below, why some souls retain their intense light, like real tzaddikim, and they never are affected by this world. I mean, everyone's affected, let's make that clear. But to the extent, and other souls, the souls become completely trapped in this world.
Explain that.
So, hold on. So the reason is,
Not everyone. What is...
in Tanya, Perek Lamed Zayin, he says that every soul, the way it's down below, its avavir is never like it is above. That's what it says in Tanya. Feel it's tzaddikim gemurim. Yeah. Because this world has an impact. Anyway, let me explain. I'm in the middle of explaining the whole thing. Everyone wants to understand what they live on. I want to explain it for everybody. So let me explain the whole thing. So there's different types of souls. Their differences don't become on earth. He's saying in their root they already have differences. For them to be affected differently as they come down below is because in their source they're different. In Atzilus itself, there are souls that are connected from, here generally Zah, which would be the Shamas of Ma. Those are souls whose main role is to be like Moshe Rabbeinu, to come down and bring light into the world, to be leaders in that type of sense. Then there are souls that come down and they're... That's what he calls it. Zoh, that's what he calls it. Zoh, because Zoh and Malchus. And then come souls that come down to transform the world. To transform, and therefore they get more engaged with the material. That would be like Eliyahu compared to Moshe Rabbeinu. One second, I'm in the middle of talking. I'm going to say the whole thing. You're thinking ahead, or you're thinking if you're not going to hear what I say now, trust me, you're not going to hear about David either. So you have to have patience, and let's hear it. We're all learning the same thing together. Trying to understand the whole thing here. So you have here two types of souls that come down. Good. In their root, they rooted in two different places. One is rooted in a place, they're all rooted in Kalim. Because for them to come down, they have to have connection to Kalim. That's why Neshama is said to be Tehirdihi Primis HaKalim. That's clear. But in Kalim itself, where's the main Kalim? Is in Malchus. So the souls that are more connected to, their mission is going to be involved more in transforming the matter. Their ibur, their pregnancy is longer, like 12 months of Eliyahu, and it's in Malchus. Okay. The truth is all neshamas go through Malchus. But some do not remain there as long. So basically they don't gestate as long. Eliyahu gestated in Malchus for 12 months, his soul. So when he was come down to Biyah, that soul can be more, it's now more acclimated to the body. A neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu only gestated for 7 months, so it did not assume so much relationship with Kalim. It's still Kalim. He was a body and a soul, but his body is primarily just simply a expression of his soul, as opposed to refining the body. That was not his mission. Okay, fine. So you have Neshamas Ma, Neshamas Ban, their roots are different. Got it? Now even Neshamas of, so he's explaining. Shcheira, you can only say in Bnei Yerushalayim, only on the souls that are connected to Ban, or to Malchus. You can't say it, because you wouldn't call Moshe, you wouldn't call Bnei Yerushalayim, you'd call him either Ben Lamokim, or Achim, or Reim, or whatever. You wouldn't call him a daughter of Israel, you'd call him a son, or a friend, or a brother. That's a different level. On the Shamas the Ban, you'd call them Bnei Yerushalayim, and they're affected by this descent. Then he asks a question. One second. Okay. So now, what about these neshamas of Ban? What are they like? On one hand, they're not like angels, because angels already have possible negative elements, we spoke. Which he doesn't really elaborate on. It just means an angel, because it's in Biyah. Angels are rooted in Biyah. It's rooted in Biyah, they don't have the same pure divine. A soul, even Bnei Yerushalayim have Yerushalayim. They're daughters of Yerushalayim, which means they are connected to complete awe of the divine. They have bittul. But it's not quite the same level. It's already a daughter, meaning it's already an extension of, it's already a reflection. That's why it can assume the relationship with the material that it will later have as it descends below. So now he's explaining. So then he says that even though they're Elokus Mamish, on the other hand, they're not quite the same type of level of a soul, let's say, of Zoh. And this is the parenthesis says. For example, Chokhmah is ultimate bittul. Chokhmah is not B'reish Shalayim. Chokhmah has no personality of its own at all. You can't even call it gestating in a state because it's Chokhmah. It's basically pure. It's already a spark compared to Keser, but it's Chokhmah. David, on the other hand, is a neshama of Malchus. He's like a neshama of Ban. He's like Eliyahu. As a neshama of Ban, that's why he could not live. Because to be able to be connected, to live, you need to have bittul, complete bittul telekuz. That's what he said before in chapter 161. David did not have that bittul on his own because he's already becoming a substance of his own, on his own, so he can't live on his own. That's the bottom line. So it has a bittul, but it's not the total bittul that you have in Chokhmah.
How is every person alive?
We're not, because we're not even connected on that level. We are alive because the purpose is that we should be a yesh. You're talking about a person David was a neshama of Atzilus, but he was in the lowest element of Atzilus.
Yeah.
So that's the problem.
Why didn't Eliyahu have the same problem as David?
Because it's not mathematics, because they're obviously not the same human being. Why don't you ask a better question? If you have Eliyahu and Navi, what do you need David?
Another question.
No, that's the answer. They're different, because there's differences. Because they're not exactly the same level, that's why. First of all, Eliyahu he called Ban of Ma. Maybe David is just Ban. Maybe. Fine.
Maybe David is just Ban?
Maybe. I don't know. It doesn't say specifically here. But clearly there's different levels. That's for sure the explanation.
You have to say that they are from Ma.
If someone told you this to you, or you're guessing?
From you. David will not be able to survive because he was Ban.
But he did survive because he was giving life. How do you know the other Rabbeim weren't given life? Maybe they were given life too.
Who gave him 70 years?
Adam.
I think that
He was given twice 70 years. That's the question. Adam gave him 70, but then the others, 37, were given by Yitzchak. There's a whole cheshbon. So this asks this question and answers that he was given twice for And Derech Mitzvah, Minei Melech, he talks about this at length. In chapter 161, which I looked at right now, he says clearly, I'm just reading it. David he had no life. Why? Because and Adam was Chochmah, so he gave him life. It means that this Malchus is a moon. Moon has no light of its own. We're not even a moon. That's why we have life from Biyah. Malachim also have life. Neshamas that are not Neshamas Atzilus, like ourselves, don't have this problem. David does have, because he's the lowest level in Atzilus. But he's already like the moon, which means he's somewhat already moved. So he's in this in-between place. So Neshamas that are higher have life because of their bittul. Neshamas that are lower have life because of their yeshus. They get life. And David fell in between. His malchus, so he doesn't have life of its own, and he needs life because the truth is, it's like the moon needs its light from the sun. So ultimately, actually, David is a very high level, but it's a level that on his own does not have life. He needs life. It's exactly like the moon. Less slumber gan ma klum. It doesn't have anything on its own unless it's given. That's what happened to him. Yeah.
Adam Rishon was on the Shama Datzilus?
He was maybe even higher. Adam Kadmon. Why? Why are you asking?
Because Adam Rishon, ask some person, Adam Rishon, he was a Chetzes Yadas and everything.
1 second. All Neshamas Tahirahi, all Neshamas are rooted in Atzilus, even us. The question is whether it's an express train or a local train to get here. Understand? That's the key. The Neshamas that we're talking here, Ma'o Ban, all bypass Biyah. We don't. So we assume everything that Biyah gives us. That's why we are on a lower level.
The length of gestation doesn't mean a thing. It's not.
No, the gestation for them makes a difference.
Not for us.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, for us, unless you can prove that you're one of these type of high souls. But that you can't just come around and just say it. You have to do something to demonstrate that.
What is the gestation?
I'm like the length of the pregnancy.
Basically, the difference between Chochmah and Malchus is Bittul Mitzias and Bittul Hayesh. So Malchus is also Bittul Hayesh, but it's a Yesh. There's already a Yesh there. Yeah. You see, David is unique because David is a Yesh that's going to live. See, Chochmah. Here, mashma that Adam comes from Chochmah, by the way. So Chochmah is Bittul Mitzias. Yeah. Valkein and Hashem is commission kalulim b'malchus.
Chesed and
Yeah,
Gvura
very
are
short
also
gestation
having the.
Whatever region have like a boom to gestation period.
Well, he didn't have any gestation
I
period.
know, right? As short as possible.
Valkein and Hashem. You asking me something?
Yeah, that he not only Malchus said before that Chesed and Gvura are also having this thing.
He said, "How could you say Chesed and Gvura and Atzilus? Because it's Alakus." So he answered was the main Aviyir is in Malchus, not in Chesed, not in Chesed and Gvura.
Sounds like all of Neshamas is here.
But then he says in the parentheses also Esesviras, but there's like Matu v'loy Mati, no real Aviyir.
You know, Shirchayim was talking about Neshamas in Malchus. He's all Neshamas is here.
I don't know what you're saying right now.
In other words, it's not just uniquely Neshamas Tepan, they're in Malchus.
The comparison here is Neshamas of Ma to Ban, not to the rest of the Neshamas. That's the discussion here. Like Moshe and Eliyahu, let's say. So here's the difference between those that are primarily to reveal the soul. The Ikra Avodah is with the Neshama, Ikra with the body. He's not talking about the others. Because others are for sure in the category of Bnei Yerushalayim, but they may be even lower. That's not a chiddush that Shcheirani said in most souls. He's talking here, he's going here and discussing souls as they come below. Why they assume this darkness. That's what he's talking about. Come to explain that once they come below, they go. It's all an explanation. We're still in the middle of the subject matter. Right now, he explained Bnei Yerushalayim is the souls of Malchus, or the souls of Ban, who have Yerushalayim. On one hand, they have Yerushalayim, but on the other hand, they could become darkened because they relate to existence. And that's why the souls, the way they're encompassed, the Malchus are called the daughters of Yerushalayim. Because they have complete Yerushalayim, complete awe and selflessness. On this level, the soul is Tahira, pure Tahira, like from all levels of Yeshus, of its own personality. Like it says, Likutei Torah in the second Maimer of Samti Kotkid. See, this seems to contradict a bit what he said a minute before. He says that it doesn't have Yeshus. Okay, it's a yesh, but it's bottled. That's the bottom line. The mashamas of ma are not even a yesh. They don't have substance. All they are is a divine expression of a divine soul. The shamas of ban, like David, have yesh, and that's why on his own he doesn't have any life, and he needs life to be given to him. But on the other hand, the yesh is bottled. It's not a yesh. That's why he wouldn't live, because he would be bottled. He's bottled. He doesn't. So they have bittul hayesh completely. And that's why they're tahir. But they're already in a state that as they descend lower, they will be affected. So he says, that's what he says next. However, as the soul descends below, it says, you're created, you're shaped. It becomes a state of self and a separate entity from its source. Ukanoida, as it's known, that Neshama is b'shashanim b'chinis alma diskasya. Souls and their root are in a state of hidden worlds. Shmiyachodim b'kerim, that are connected and attached to their source, kamei dogim shabiyam, like fish in the sea. Ubiridosam lamata, and their descent below, harihem b'chinis nevroim, dalma disgalya, shem nefrodim b'kerim. They become creatures of this revealed world. That means they're separate from the world, from their source. So the difference between fish and land mammals is fish are always attached to their source, and land animals are not. So he says that's how souls are. Above, the souls in their root, they're attached to their source. They always feel their source. They come separate, they come below, they like leave the water to dry land. And the period of time that the soul descends below, and on this it says, I am dark. The soul below says this to the soul above, as it's above. Before it manifests in the body. Even though I am dark, in the darkening and the concealment of the energy, and moreover, that through my body and animal soul, its energy, its light became even more concealed. And it gets distant from its source. To the extent that it needs a tremendous amount of effort to come to some type of awe. So basically he's saying, so this is what's going on there. B'nai Shalayim. Who's saying Shcheirani? The soul as it's below is speaking to the daughters of Israel. And saying, daughters of Israel, the soul as you are above, I am darkened here in this world, in this period of time that I come below. And I need tremendous effort to find Yira. And this effort is in two ways, in two matters. One is a contemplation to affect this awe. Being that true Yira, true awe, does not come only through comprehending a thing alone. Oh, I'm sorry, let me correct that. Yira does not just come only through contemplation. Love can come only through contemplation of the divine concepts, and margish, so he feels the quality of godliness. How long is this parenthesis? It's a long one, huh? I'm going to skip the parentheses for now. And through this contemplation, he's awakened with a love and a yearning to godliness. When it's awe, it's not sufficient. It does not suffice just comprehension alone. You also have to have an abundant and an additional element of sensing it, of intuition, of feeling it. Like the idea of recognition. In other words, to love something, if someone explains to you an idea that's really beautiful, you can come to be attracted to it. But to stand in awe requires something more. It requires that you recognize it in some way. That means that the idea should be by him in some close way, at Kiruv HaMuhuz, that some of its personality you relate to at least a bit. And dafka through that, specifically through that, you get awakened in awe. Remember, this chapter is not concluding the subject. The Shcheirani continues in the next chapter. If you look at the next chapter, he goes back, and this is what the soul says, that I'm dark. So right now, he's emphasizing how difficult it is to come to awe. And he says, awe is different than love. Love requires contemplation. Awe requires more than that. It requires a type of sensing. You have to recognize it. You have to recognize it more. Now, why? I'm not sure. Let's see. He's continuing. Let me read. I'm skipping the parentheses because it's going to definitely confuse until we get this clear. One second. V'hainu, why is this the case? Because awe, in its foundation, he begins bitl hamuhus. It's fundamentally that your whole personality is being nullified, is being dissolved. Love is in a state of I love, a yesh mishayev. There's someone that loves. Even though in Yira there's also a method that there's someone that is in awe. Like it says elsewhere, nevertheless, in general, Yira is far more, much more dissolving of yourself. Which makes sense, because when you love something, you can love it, and I love this thing, and I'm connecting to it. Yira is not about you; it's about standing in awe of something. So yes, there is a level that I'm still there and standing in awe, but true Yira is complete dissolving yourself, complete absorption into what is causing you to have awe. That's what he's saying right now. It's an interesting piece. Okay. So and that's why it comes specifically through some type of getting close to the personality of this thing. But by this, to get some type of closeness to understand the personality of this awesome thing, in at least some hakara, some recognition. So love, you can love it without necessarily fully appreciating it. But to stand in awe that you should be completely absorbed by it, you need to know more about it. And once you know more about it, once you recognize it, that will cause you to dissolve. That's what he's saying.
You love something you have to be involved in.
Correct. Yeah. Well, moving.
When you're in awe of something, you also have the love. Right.
Well, moving. Now he says in the second parenthesis, moving. It's understood. The hein ba'ava, the hein b'yirah, kashem boim b'chinas hariyah. He's not qualifying. Both love and awe, when they come in a state of riyah, that you're seeing it, harihem gvoyim b'malos ben arech. They're far infinitely greater in quality. V'kan, but however, what we're discussing here, ein hakavana b'zeh b'chinas hariyah. We're not talking here about actually seeing. We're not talking about complete seeing the experience. Meaning seeing it as if it's real. We're talking here from somewhat of a distance. And we're also not talking about true recognition. Here we're discussing that love it's enough, sufficient, a closeness to the divine thing, to the extent that you got close through contemplation, through comprehension. And in awe, you need to have in the comprehension itself at least some recognition and sense of the object itself. So he's speaking there's another level completely that he's not discussing here. He's clearly speaking here on a so-called relatively lower level. And for this we need to have an increasing effort. So he's basically explaining what the soul is saying to the soul above. I'm dark, because finding awe in this world is very difficult. Awe, Yira. Because Yira is harder than finding Ava, because you need to have some recognition. And there's a second reason why it's so difficult. Because there needs to be the effort of refining the coarseness. So besides the mere fact that to find such awe and such a recognition of the divine is difficult, I also have to deal with a very coarse body I have. In the parentheses he qualifies, V'gam liyes, that there really is a connection between the two things, because it's also being this recognition. To have this recognition, you also need sichuch hagash achumris. But there's two separate things. He's saying, in other words, also the first thing requires refining the chumri, because you're not going to reach that type of awareness of the divine without refining the coarseness. Or Kamaim Razal Yagait to be Yira, like it says, Razal say Yagait to be Yira, that you should exert yourself in awe. Awe requires a tremendous and awesome amount of effort. And even after he comes to a state of awe, it's still not comparable to the awe of angels, Gamkein. And for sure not like the awe of the souls. Oh boy. What? It stopped. I don't know when. Must have been. Is it still going? Oh, you know what? Okay. So I'm not sure where it got cut off. I hope. I'll just go over this a moment. So bottom line is that Yira needs some type of recognition. He explained the parenthesis that even though in a higher level of seeing, they're completely on a different level, both of them on a higher level, love and awe. But here the intention is not riyah and not even real recognition. Here the point is that through love, through comprehension, love, you can reach to some level of love, and Yira needs more than that. You need also some recognition and sense in the object. And this requires tremendous amount of effort to have such recognition. The second aspect of Yigiyah is because you need to refine the crassness of the body, of matter, we have to refine crassness to come to such awe and bittul and absorption. And also he says in the parentheses, also the hakara, the first element, also needs this refinement of the crass. Yigaita means struggle, exert yourself in Yira, which means that awe needs a tremendous amount of effort, a tremendous and awesome amount of effort. And also, even after you come to a state of awe, it's not at all measurable, or it's not at all alike, similar, it's all the same quality as the awe of angels. And definitely not the awe of the souls, as they are above, Bnei Yerushalayim. So bottom line is, what he's basically saying here is the souls come down below. And he explained the dynamic, how they come down below. They move to a place of distance, and they cry out and tell their soul that we are dark. In this world, it's a very dark place. And it's very hard to come to awe, for the reasons he just explained. The question is, should we go over the longer parentheses now?
Not if we have it quickly. And it's more, it takes more. It's up to you. We could do it superficially.
I'll do it quickly, and then we'll go over it again. So what does he say in chapter here? What does he say in the parentheses? So the gist of the chapter, I hope you all got, without all the details necessarily, but the gist is, he's coming to explain that the connection, when a soul connects from below, after it's become so-called separate from its source, it's going to be deeper than the unity that it had when it was above. To explain that, he speaks about how the soul comes down below and the descent. And he explains it with Shcheira and Ivanova B'nai Yerushalayim, the pasuk. I am dark and beautiful, daughters of Israel, daughters of Jerusalem. I'm sorry. So he explains B'nai Yerushalayim is Neshamis and Malchus, or Neshamis the Ban, who are standing in complete awe. They, however, will descend below, and below they will assume the concealments to the point that they're so distant that they feel darkened. And that's what they're saying. Shcheirani, we are dark. Because we're no longer like fish in the sea, or feel connected to our source, we're separate. And as such, it comes with great effort for us to achieve a state of awe as you have in heaven. And the two reasons it's difficult is, one, because awe requires more than just love, not just contemplation, comprehension, but also a sense of the source, and that takes effort, a lot of effort. And secondly, because we have to deal with a crass world, a crassness of this existence. So those are the two reasons we're shcheira, we're darkened. That's the gist of the chapter. And we're going to continue, obviously, learning what happens next. Once it calls out that it's dark, how does the soul reconnect?
The Neshama ultimately improved their lot upstairs, but the Moshe Rabbeinu's soul didn't go through that because it was Ma, so he didn't really get better by being.
This pasuk is not talking about Moshe Rabbeinu. This pasuk is talking about souls that are affected by Bnei Yerushalayim. It's talking about the Shamas of Malchus. And second of all, we didn't get there yet. We still have a chapter to. We didn't talk about yet the Aliyah. He didn't talk about the elevation. He's talking now about the dark. The chapter continues. Next chapter, he's going to talk about what happens next. We didn't get there yet. We'll see. I'm sure he'll discuss it. What happens to the souls, all souls. That's the gist of it. It's not that complicated, by the way. It's more complicated when you want to know the details, exactly dynamic, where the souls come from. Ba, man. But that was an elaboration of what Bnei Yerushalayim. But the most important thing is to know the general point. Then you can go back and learn again the specifics. But the bottom line is, the soul is below, talking to the souls of the daughters of Israel. It says clearly, the neshama is below, is speaking. Anishka Shcheirani, and the neshama of the Mata says it's the neshama the way it's higher than beyond the manifested body. So let me read the parentheses I skipped. So what parentheses I skipped was all part of that awe requires more than love, more recognition than love. Love, it requires contemplation, because you're still a yesh. Awe, however, requires a complete dissolving, and that requires more recognition of the thing that you're contemplating. That's basically what he said. Even though there's a level of yesh mishayari, but it's not really what awe is about. So now he says that Ava that comes through Hasaga, in itself, there's also two levels. If you remember in chapter 171, which is what he's referring to, he spoke, there's also two levels in love. What did he say there? Remember he said there's a contemplation right here. There's a contemplation, and then afterwards you feel the quality of the divine. Yeah. And then there's a higher level that during the contemplation you feel the godliness itself while you're contemplating it. So he says, now he's referring to that here. Either way, Yira requires more than Ava in either way that we spoke earlier. If the contemplation of the idea and the sense of the quality of and preciousness of the divine comes together with the contemplation, or it comes afterwards, like we learned this earlier, chapter 171. Either way, in love, all you need is contemplation. You don't need hakara. That's what he's saying here. The difference in these two ways, if this, what is dominating? What is the dominating factor? The sense of the divine shemasig ala saga atzma. What's more important is the divine that he's comprehending is more powerful than the comprehension itself. Then the feeling of the quality and the preciousness is during the contemplation. However, if the contemplation is what dominates, then comes the feeling of the quality afterwards, like he discussed there. The primary difference, he's basically elaborating on that point that he's discussed earlier. The primary difference between them is the primary difference if the comprehension is in an inner dimension of comprehension or it's more superficial. The basoga primis in a more internalized comprehension. His gabrus side hergeshaliki yeser. If he really applies himself and is really thinking about it in a deep internal way, then what will dominate is there will be increasingly the divine feeling. B'chitzenis hasaga, a more superficial comprehension, his gabras hasaga yeser. Then the comprehension is more dominating. Omnam gam b'chitzenis hasaga yesh b'zeh hefresh ben dakus hasaga levgasus hasaga. Now he's going even further. However, also in superficial comprehension, there's also a difference between a subtle comprehension and a more coarse, less subtle comprehension. The bedakus hasaga nirgashin yaliki. In a more subtle comprehension, you feel more you feel the divine, mashamasig, in what he's comprehending. Ubasaga mukshemes, and in a more materialistic, crass comprehension, nirgish hasaga b'yeser. You feel the comprehension more. In this, you're able to, with this is possible to have a refinement to arrive to a more refined and subtle form of comprehension. So he's saying now like this, that even in superficial contemplation, you can also have more divine if it's more subtle and you can refine yourself. But in general, a superficial contemplation will be much more focus on the intelligence of it than on the divine of it. In general, the more superficial comprehension there dominates comprehension more. Do you understand this, or you want me to explain? It's a pretty clear understanding, actually. When you're thinking about something, there's two elements. There's your understanding of it, and then you're feeling the object that you're understanding. So let's take human beings, let's say. Someone who has a lot of empathy. If I understand you, I could be more focused on my understanding, or I actually getting and sensing what you're about. Same thing with the divine. You could be focusing on understanding it, and knowing it's divine, but it's not quite as dominant as your comprehension of it. You'll see this was also, people, for example, can comprehend a piece of music, but they don't really get the music, they just understand it, and they don't feel it.
Brain versus right brain.
Yeah, exactly, brain, right. So he's saying the difference is generally whether you are superficial intelligence, comprehension, or internal. Then he says, even superficial, if it's more subtle, you can get more of the divine. But generally speaking, it requires a more intense contemplation to be able to appreciate that the divine itself that comes while you're comprehending it and not afterwards. Even the other one, even the superficial, also can lead you there. But you're not appreciating the divine while you're comprehending it. It's very subtle discussion here. Okay, then he gets with that. And more generally, until now, he was talking about the distinction from the point of view of comprehension. Now he's saying, in more general, the difference is in the goodness of what is of fundamental divinity. In the goodness of what is of godliness at its core. That comes during the contemplation and during the comprehension and contemplation. Are you focusing that God is good, or that it's good for me? If it's God is good, then you could be focused, even during the contemplation you can arrive there. If it's good for you, that comes after the comprehension and contemplation. Why? Because it's about you. You're thinking about God, and then the conclusion is it's good for me. So then that appreciation will come afterwards.
I don't understand.
One second. And that itself is dependent. And this itself is also dependent on the first element, he said. If it's a more intimate understanding or a more superficial one. In a more intimate understanding, comprehension, the feeling is in the goodness of God itself and coreness of the divine itself. Nevertheless, also in the feeling that God is good for me, there's also this difference. If what dominates is the feeling of the divine, then automatically it comes that you feel that God is good for you. But when the intelligence is what is, the comprehension is what dominates, it doesn't come right away, it will come afterwards. However it goes, either way, however you explain it, through comprehending, you feel the quality and the preciousness of the divine, and that's only an Ava. In Yira, you'll need to have more of a recognition. That's the parentheses. Yes.
First take, it's like the whole first take.
I'm going to go over it again.
It's like what we discussed, the
Yeah.
whole first
I
take.
think you answered the question.
That's why I wanted to read till the end. It's basically, you need explanation, but basically he's talking about how much we feel the divine while we're thinking about it. And does it come afterwards, or is it part of it? And it comes down to how intimate your connection is, how subtle it is, and whether you're talking about God himself, good for me or good for this. It seems to me the other way around, that good for you you'd come to quicker than knowing that God is good just because it's good. But I think if you appreciate the goodness and greatness of God, divine itself, then that dominates and not the comprehension. If you're thinking about yourself, that's going to come as a result. I'll do the kitzur. So then that's Ava. And here is the other way. Ubir the Inyan and the explanation, Dini is Kashrus. Now the connection, this bond, that the soul's bond to the divine, Hagam, and through Torah, Hagam Shazor B'Davar Nivdal Yesh B'Zeh Yisr. Even though it's in a thing that's separate and apart, it has an advantage, a quality. Dini Ksiv Shchera Nivanova B'nei Yerushalayim. I am dark and beautiful, the daughters of Jerusalem. B'nei Yerushalayim hein neshama shein b'atzilas be'ibur b'chinas malchus. Daughters of Yerushalayim, these are the souls that are in atzilas, in a state of gestation, in the state in malchus. The b'malchus shaykhin ha'rotzei. Malchus, there's possible rotzei, a yearning. U'b'nesham is the sham hu inyan ha'yira. And the souls that are there, that's the idea of yira shalom. Oy shein nesham is the ban, or a second explanation of the nesham is of ban. Shein b'chinas bitla yeshes. Their thing is bitla yeshes, which means, the first explanation is just that there's a yearning because it's somewhat apart. Here there's a bitla yeshes because they already have a state of some type of substance. V'shamu shleima sayira, and that's where they have complete and full, wholesome awe.
Is there a class in the shamas that's shaykh to Malchus that we're talking about?
Ban. Sham is the ban. He just said that.
He says there, this or this. He seems.
It's two explanations. He said it right there. It's yesh shleimer. There were two explanations what Bnei Yerushalayim are.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the problem?
So there are neshamas that are.
The Sham is the ban. What's your question?
Now, are shamas the ban and shamas in the shaykh and Malchus one and the same?
And the second explanation, first he didn't bring ban.
Yeah, that's what's wrong.
So what's your question?
So the first explanation seems to be a difference between the two.
What's the difference?
I don't know.
He's not speaking about ban there. There he's speaking that Bnei Yerushalayim is talking about the neshamas as they are in Malchus. And then they have an element of yira because there's a rotzei, there's a yearning. Because they're in a state of Malchus.
Okay, we're going to follow some shamas.
Mashenk b'yah gam b'malachim, however, in Bibri it says even angels will be ridosel matatzi. But no, stop. B'yah, there's no in malachim they don't have this shleimus yira. Now he continues be ridosel matam when the soul descends below tzrichi yegia be yeser ala yira. It needs exertion and in an increased fashion in order to achieve awe. V'hu yegia be his bonus. And this is first of all, is the exertion it needs in the contemplation. Because for love alone, all you need is sufficient. For love, what is sufficient is the comprehension and the feeling of the quality of. And explain that briefly. That was discussed earlier, chapter 171. But the awe, you need to have some minimal recognition of the object, godliness. Because it's bittul, and bittul requires more relationship to relate to it, to cause the bittul. Once it happens, you have more bittul than Ava has. But to elicit the bittul, you need to know more. Because if you don't have any idea, you can love it, but you can't really completely dissolve by it. And also the exertion that's necessary in refining the chumri, the crassness, in order that there should be this awe of hakara and the recognition that he just described. So that's the so-called cry of the souls below, Shcheda, we are dark. And that's what we're going to continue in the next chapter. So we did chapter 177, pages 361 to the top of 363. We'll stop here.